This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Did you have to choose today between food and shelter? If you're watching this now, you probably did not. However, there are thousands of people in beautiful British Columbia who are faced with exactly that dire choice day after day. Among others, they're called the homeless. So this city seems dedicated to doing something about the homeless. The mayor has been very vocal about this. He set a target date, I can't remember, is it 2015? He wants the streets completely cleared of homeless. But what is it all about? How did it come about? And most importantly, what can we do about it? Well, here's someone who's doing something about it. Rob Turnbull is the president and CEO of Street to Home, an organization that has put together just an amazing group of people and an amazing amount of money and actually built places for people to live. Hi, Rob. Great to have you here. So how did it start, and who was it? Who were the people, and how did it get off the ground?
It goes back to 2008 when it became known there were 3,700 homeless in the city of Vancouver.
Wow.
And so the private sector came to the table.
Yeah.
And thought, well, we'll bring new money, new ideas, new ways of collaborating.
Yes.
There are a lot of good people that have been doing good work to address homeless services.
Absolutely.
But the nonprofits alone, nor any one sector, can solve the problem.
Right.
So the private sector came and said, let's partner with the government. So BC Housing, the City of Vancouver, Vancouver Coastal Health, and let's see what we can do to make a difference. And so our very first capital campaign was to go out and raise $26.5 million, and we accomplished that in 2 years.
Excuse me? How'd you pull that off?
Well, that's through engagement of corporations,
yes,
private foundations, and philanthropic individuals.
What was the pitch? What did you say to people?
Essentially saying this can be solved.
Yes.
There's a very good model that's being used internationally.
Yes.
And it's all about providing housing with the appropriate supports that enable people to remain housed.
Okay, so you immediately set me up for a question that has been burning in my mind since I knew I was going to talk to you about this. What are these supportive services? Because some people think, well, just give a guy or a gal a room. And your answer is no, there's more to it. What is the more?
Okay, well, first of all, it's all about housing first.
Yes.
And so you want to get people stably housed because it's only at that point that they can get out of survivor mode, no longer looking for that next meal, where they're going to sleep that night.
Yeah.
And once they become stably housed, then they can address other issues in their life, whether it's mental health, it could be addictions, it could be physical health issues. So the supports are linkages. There are in-house supports which help people maintain their properties. These people haven't been lived inside for quite a time because we are targeting chronic homeless individuals who've been out more than a year. So they have to learn how to keep an apartment, how to maintain it, how to shop, how to cook, how to socialize, how to resolve conflicts with your neighbors.
I wonder how many people appreciate at all that some of those very basic skills are just not there for a lot of folks.
You're right.
A simple thing like how to shop, how to buy good food.
How to manage budgets is critical.
Yeah. Especially when your budget is this small.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right.
So, how do you do that? How do you pull that off?
Well, so each of the buildings has support workers, and they work closely with the tenants. But they also link tenants with other resources when they're ready. So that could be mental health, addictions, local a variety of different organizations who provide individual counseling and whatever is needed by the particular tenant.
So you, in starting out, you raised over $26 million in a couple of years. Now, I happen to know 100 social service agencies who'd give their eye teeth to be able to pull that off. I mean, that's no small accomplishment.
No, and of that 26 million, 20 million's already leveraged an additional 228 million from the province.
Really?
And that money's to cover basically the interest on the capital for any of these new buildings we've built.
Yes.
And also the operating dollars to make sure that the support services are contained within the building.
Now, when you talk about getting the private sector involved, I was looking at your board of directors, and I'm seeing some pretty heavy hitters, some of whom are public servants, Penny Balaam, of course, but Frank Justra, Jeff Plant. You've got some real sluggers there, and people with sizable pockets.
We do, and it's been our board networking with their colleagues and friends to be able to bring that generosity forward and meet that objective.
I'm curious to know what the real trigger was for any of those people, and you have a very long list of supporters and donors, because any one of those people could say, look, I put my money in VGH, or I put my money in Children's Hospital, or all of my money goes to the blind, or whatever the case may be. Okay, how did you get some of these folks to say, okay, you know what, I hear you, this is worth doing?
I think there's a couple of different things. On the one hand, we have 3 founding funders that fund our operations. We have a very small footprint. There's 3 staff in an office. The office space is donated.
Yes.
The funders are Vancouver Foundation, BC Housing, the City of Vancouver. And so that we can argue to donors that 100% of those donations flow to impact the homeless. The other thing is there's very good evidence for Housing First. It's working internationally. We explored examples in England, Australia, that you had consultants come up from the States. We built a 10-year plan, so it's very logical and systematic on how we're going to solve homelessness. And we went out and worked with over 60 different service providers to put this plan together. And I think a real key was when Frank Justra stepped up and through the Radcliffe Foundation gave that lead donation of $5 million.
Wow.
And said, you know what, we can do this. And it's through Frank's leadership that we've been so successful.
And when you went to people, for example, like the Salvation Army, who have been doing work with homelessness for a zillion years, I'm just imagining, did you ask them, what's working for you and what isn't working for you? What else do you need? Are those the kinds of conversations you were having with people like that?
No, when working with service providers, it's, well, what does the system need? Where do we need to put our resources? And so they came up with 3 goals collectively. One is to build more housing with appropriate supports. Second one is the goal is to prevent vulnerable people from becoming homeless in the first place. And the third one is to build that broad public support for providing permanent solutions to homelessness.
I think when people, many of us, when we think about the city, for example, tackling homeless issues, we think about single room occupancy hotels in the downtown east side. And you may or may not have done some of that, but you've also built brand new buildings.
Yes, we have.
And one of them is very close to where I live, the Sanford Apartments.
Brilliant.
At 7th and Fur. Yeah, it is brilliant. Let's talk about that. Tell me how that building got built and what it's all about.
So Sanford's our very first building.
Yes.
It's been open about a year. It's 62 units for folks living with mental health and addictions issues. We just did our 1-year annual evaluation, and the numbers were staggering. 98% of the tenants are still stably housed.
Really?
97% of the tenants are hopeful and feel supported in meeting their goals in the future.
Yes.
So we're very pleased with the results we've got from Sanford. I can share a story of a woman that is living at Sanford, who I recently met at an art exhibition, and Adeline is her name. And Adeline had worked in the community in a restaurant for 21 years, then retired.
Yes.
But wasn't able to keep up with the expenses on her meager salary or what she'd accumulated. And it wasn't long before she was homeless. And for the past 11 years, Adeline has been renting a couch in an office building.
Wow.
So she doesn't have her own kitchen or private bathroom.
Doesn't have a shower.
And think, this is someone who's well-known, well-liked in the neighborhood,
Yes.
a great social network. Now
Yes.
she's living off in an apartment or in a office building on a couch. At night, that's where she's sleeping, and she felt very isolated. And that actually impacted her mental health. And so Adeline, just through some circumstance, ran into this organization called MPA,
Yes.
Motivation, Power, and Achievement.
Formerly Mental Patients Association.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're the nonprofit that are actually offering the services. They've got a resource center in Sanford.
So you partnered with MPA.
So that's right.
Yeah.
So she found out there was a new building going up. She applied. She was successful. And she's just been transformed. My goodness! If you I met her at this art show, and she carries pictures of her new kitchen. She said, "You know, I haven't cooked for 11 years.
Wow!
I haven't had my own bathroom for 11 years." And she showed a picture of her pet, and then her artwork is just beautiful. And just to see her working the crowd and the folks, I mean, she's back in her element, and it's really transformed her without a doubt.
I was walking up the hill from Granville Island one day because I live not far from the Sanford building, and I didn't know what it was, but I took one look at it, and because of my years working in this area, I had an immediate sense of what kind of thing this could be. And I walked in and I started talking to people, and I talked to both staff and clients. And I knew within a matter of minutes that this was not only a good place, it was a great place.
Good.
I could tell right away that people felt safe. First issue, right? They felt safe. They felt comfortable. They were relaxed. They were talking about things. The staff looked like they enjoyed coming to work. These are not small issues. That's huge.
There's a real sense of community both within the building, and they're well integrated in their community. Adeline and many tenants participate in there's a monthly newsletter they write about the stories and how their lives have been changed, and it's just wonderful to see, inspirational.
Did Street to Home build that building?
So we have a funding model, and our model is we are always the last in, and we leverage our dollar, and it's $20,000 per door.
Yes.
So that was $20,000 times 62.
Yeah.
And our money only goes in pending verification of the tenants. We really want to ensure that the tenants who are going into these buildings are either from the street or from shelters.
Yeah. So you're not just going to open a place and hope to hell something happens.
We are accountable to our donors. We've got to go back. We actually, as part of our agreement with any of the nonprofits, is we wanted an evaluation conducted each year for 2 years post-occupancy, so we can go back to our donors with the good news like we got from Sanford.
We're going to take a break. We come back, we're going to talk about some costs, because there's very interesting numbers on your website, streettohome.org, and also you mentioned two capital P's that fascinate me, prevention and permanency. So we'll come back and talk about that. Our guest is Rob Turnbull, President and CEO of Street to Home. And we just take a little breather. Your chance to send us an email. davidberner.com is the site to go to. Always happy to hear from you. And also an opportunity for those lovely folks who help bring the program to you to say hello here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back in a moment. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. I think it was a fellow who was a lot smarter and more famous than me, even though he didn't have a TV show, once said, "The poor shall always remain amongst ye." But even he must have known that we don't have to just stand by and let the poor suffer. We are our brother's keeper to some degree or another. and we can do some very real things. Street to Home, wonderful, very quiet organization, has been doing some real things for the last 5 or so years here in the community about the constant problem of homelessness in the Lower Mainland. Rob Turnbull is the president and CEO. Let's talk about that constant turnover. If you read current reports, you'll see that, okay, homelessness numbers are going down, and then they come right back up, or the people living below a certain poverty level go down, and then they come back up. Where are all the new homeless? It's very interesting where the next generation of homeless are coming from.
Okay, well, we know from the last 3 years that homelessness is relatively stable across.
That's what I mean.
1,600.
Yeah.
Folks. And
so that's why I'm asking, because you guys are helping to cut those numbers down, but the numbers stay.
Well, some of the challenges are just the amount of time it takes to get our buildings up and running. So we only had one building open prior to the last homeless count. That's the 62 units in Sanford. We did fund 16 units for single moms at Aboriginal Mother Centre, 24 units at the Vancouver Native Housing, things like that.
Right.
But relatively small numbers.
Right.
Most of our sites are coming on between the next two homeless counts. So we just opened one on West 2nd, 147 units.
Second and where?
West 2nd and Cambie.
Okay.
And it's 147 units for individuals living with mental health and addictions.
Yeah.
We also opened up one on Howe, and that is Howe and Drake.
Yeah.
And it's 110 units for folks living with HIV and AIDS.
What is the former, what's it called, Bozeman Hotel?
Bosman.
Motel? Is that yours?
Well, so we funded the renovation of the Bosman as part of the at-home shade study.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, and I've heard good things about that.
It was a great experiment, and the final report's going to be coming out soon.
Yeah.
But clearly that the Housing First did a lot better than Treatment as Usual.
But when you look at one of the reports says something about, and this part fascinated me. Here's a comment from Penny Balaam, who says, foster children, here's some of the people coming in, foster children who have no further support because they've turned 19, prisons and jails who don't assess real needs, they just say you've done your time, get out of here, or you're paroled, good luck, medical system and its revolving doors in a number of issues, and just simply the rising unaffordability of housing in a very expensive world city.
Right.
Right.
We know there are a number of different pathways people come into homelessness. You've mentioned some of them already, but mental health and addictions, underemployment, poverty. I can hit three high ones that we're going to target, and we're currently exploring. So discharge from hospitals is big.
I can tell you something obvious, that working with addicts, as I continue to do, one of the most difficult groups of people to help are kids who've spent years in foster care. They just so lack self-belief. They so lack love and support. And you can help them. It just takes a day or two to get off drugs and alcohol. That's nothing. It's everything else. It's all the other props that aren't there that so many of us take for granted. You know, many of us we bounce out of bed and we've got confidence and we're going to conquer the world this morning. But a lot of people, just taking the first step in the morning is torture.
Right. So Street to Home strategy is about getting those folks housed.
Right.
Each of those three pathways you've mentioned, being discharged from hospitals, being discharged from corrections, or youth agent out of foster care.
Yeah.
How do we provide the housing? We have to model what the need is, and then who's the service provider who's going to
Now you folks have something that normally I would scoff at, and I've seen government agencies that have a 10-year plan, and I've read these 10-year plans and thrown them in the garbage. To me, they're just a joke. But you folks have a 10-year plan that must be taken seriously because you really mean to do something, and you're getting there, which is astonishing.
We have 706 new units of supportive housing coming on between now and August.
So, talk about prevention. Okay. What are the strategies? How can we help people not fall off the lid and end up on the street?
Okay. You've already heard about the rent bank.
Yeah, yes.
You had a
the
show
rent
on
bank
that.
was here. She was here. She was wonderful.
I was listening very closely because
yeah.
I've just seen the annual report.
Yes.
And it has had a tremendous impact. So basically, we funded the capital portion, the loan portion. And in the course of 1 year, 137 or 38 loans were given out.
Yes.
which impacted 200 individuals and 39 children.
Wow.
And I can share a story about a woman I know who was impacted by that.
Yeah, please.
Christine and her daughter Daisy live in Marpole.
Yep.
They've been renting a house for 8 years. And then Christine got into a bus accident, was injured, and then could no longer work, was borrowing money from friends, and had many a sleepless night wondering how she's going to manage her rent, how she's going to manage her utilities, which friends would they approach to try to, couch surf? Would they end up in shelters?
Yes.
And then just so happened that's when the rent bank was announced. She was watching the news. She goes, wow, isn't this phenomenal? She applied, and within weeks she received an $1,800 loan, and that allowed her to pay her month's rent and her utilities. In addition, the staff at the Network for Inner-City Community Services Society brokered the relationship with their landlord, with the utilities, and also provided through their link with Van City the financial assistance so that Christine could learn to budget. Now Christine is so grateful that this opportunity was there, got her through a very rough time, and now she's very hopeful about her future.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the people that won't be heard. That how do we get to, there's many people who will fall into a Christine kind of situation, but they won't have noticed the story on TV or something. And I'm wondering if we're going to people who are already in social work and in the system and saying, keep your eye out for those people who are teetering on the edge. Are we doing something like that?
I think so. They're doing a very good job of networking through the neighborhood and the community centers, neighborhood houses, and I think the word's getting out. And so I assume we're going to impact at least in there 200 people this year.
Wonderful. Okay, the other big P word, that was prevention, permanency. What you want is not the kind of thing that I and a former city councillor wanted to do many, many years ago. We wanted to take over the Broad Street armories for Christmas. Just for people to get out from the cold. That didn't happen because of politics. But that was a temporary idea. You guys are thinking much bigger. Tell us about permanency. How do you create this permanency?
Okay, so it's all about permanent supportive housing, so the tenants can live there as long as they so choose.
Yes.
Tenants may leave ultimately. A building may not have the right personality for them, or they may want to move to a different neighborhood. But they are permanent, self-contained units, so they have to have a kitchenette, have to have a bathroom, and then a living area.
Yes.
I can give you an example of a fellow I met, that Reg, who was living with HIV in Alberta. He came to BC, and he came for better health care, and thought he'd find a place, couldn't. It's a crazy market, so he ended up living in a shelter. And you can imagine living in a shelter and trying to manage your medications, which have to be locked up. Trying to get adequate nutrition. Well, his health was compromised, and he ended up in hospital. Then he heard about our Howe Street building, and he just wasn't sure he was going to live long enough because we still had 6 months left to build this. So he actually purchased a funeral package.
Really?
And he said, I'm not quite sure I'm going to make it. But he did make it. He got in our housing. A few more visits to the hospital. He's stabilized. He hasn't got grandchildren yet, but he tells the story that his doctor says he's got a long life ahead of him. He's healthy. He's able to manage his disease. And he's very hopeful that he's going to actually coddle those grandchildren in his rocking chair. So he's got something to look forward to.
The fact that Reg ended up in the hospital illustrates the last point I want to make, and that is the cost of homelessness versus the cost of finding permanent homes. You say on your website it costs at least $55 a day for someone to be homeless, and people would go, well, what is that?
55,000.
50,000. Sorry. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, it means things like hospital expenses. It means police. It means ambulances. What else? Nurses. Whatever. But to get someone stabilized in a permanent home costs $37,000. Or less.
And that's an average across the board, because there's some high need, moderate need, very low need.
But it's cheaper to find a good solution.
It makes sense, but it also frees up capacity in all those services so they can meet the needs of the public, right?
Yes.
Because these are all preventable.
If homeless people, and certainly drug addicts, who I know better than homeless, are wandering through St. Paul's Hospital in and out and in and out, that doesn't allow much room for guys like me with cardiac problems.
Right. Absolutely.
So we have to, you know, out of pure self-interest. We've got 1 minute left. Okay. What's your dream? What's your big hope?
To be unemployed, to be
Yeah.
put out of work.
Yeah.
You know, we have a 10-year plan, 2010 to 2020.
Yeah.
I think we're going to solve homelessness probably sooner than that.
Yeah.
We're down to 1,600. Let's
Yeah.
take a look at what the next count reads. We're modeling how many more supportive homes we need. We'll address those 3 pathways we talked about, being discharged from hospitals and corrections and foster care. And so I think we're going to manage it. And with the rent bank, I think we're all encouraged at the results we're seeing. And the collaboration and partnerships. This is everybody's success here in Vancouver.
You know what? I don't often tell people, I'm not often this nice, but Street to Home just found a treasure in you because you're terribly smart and you're terribly passionate about what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Great to be here.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Okay, lovely. Next week, what's happening in sport? Now, everybody wants every child who enters an event to get a blue ribbon. We can't have people failing. Now it's starting to infect the university. Dr. Bob Heinmarch, who I think is Order of Canada, Order of BC, Hall of Fame, Hockey Hall of Fame, and so on, he will be our guest and talk about the shift in what's it called? Varsity sports. There you go. Thanks for being with us here on Shaw Community Television. Good night.